Hello and welcome to another wonderful live inspirational community collaboration. These are the locations where we bring together the bestest people we can find and help them share their inspiration and their wisdom with you, the people. We, the people, for you, the people, for us, the people, we, you, us. Exactly. Today is Tech Tuesday, and I have some wonderful guests. I have Tiffany Barsotti. Did I do that right?
You did.
Tiffany Barsotti is coming on, a magnificent scientist, Reverend Tiffany Barsotti, a scientist and spiritual healer. We'll get to her very shortly. Wonderful. Please like and share. Like the movie, share it, do all that stuff. Sharing's really the key to helping us out. So great. My name's Mark Abardi. Let's begin. Let's bring in a smooth transition, Tiffany Barsotti. Wonderful. How are you? Hello. Welcome.
Most excellent. Thank you. Thanks for doing this and creating a community.
Ooh, I like that play on that. Exactly. Where are you?
San Diego, Encinitas, California, to be exact.
Okay, so when we first met, it was at the California Institute of Integral Sciences?
Or Human Science.
California Institute for Human Sciences. And I was most impressed with the discussion we had, which was about your thesis, your master's thesis you did, which was enlightenment and the different locations in the brain stem and the different systems that activate during awakenings and realizations. Tell us a little bit about, your background leading up to that, and now what do you do?
Fantastic. Happy to share. Thank you. So yes, you are correct. We met at the California Institute for Human Science. It's actually where I helped build a lab with Gaetan Chevalier and Mary Clark, who does a lot of pranic healing teaching there, and Melinda Connor, who is actually was your guest last week.
Yeah.
We've been doing work with her from C.Ht for many years. So I'm not physically in the lab anymore, but we got something going there that was really unique. And all the while building my practice, my private practice, I essentially had a rude wake-up call and had to follow the footsteps of my true path. And that's a much longer story. It's on my website. It's called The Reluctant Healer, because I really didn't want this job. And the sort of the ups and downs and the plight of what happens when you follow your path. But if you don't, what's on the other side of that is really no good. So you eventually just come around. So that's what happened. I ended up building a private practice in New York, New Jersey, Texas, California. And a lot of that was actually happening while I was at Holos University, which is a graduate seminary. It was created by Caroline Myss and Shealy.
Norm Shealy is fantastic. How is Norm?
He's fabulous. We were both teaching for the Graduate Institute that's associated with the Yale Divinity School last month, and it was lovely to reconnect.
I think he's going on my list.
Good. Awesome.
He's going on my list. So, and of course, I met Norm from the Institute for the Study of Subtle Energy and Energy Medicine, ICEM,
Yes.
which of course is probably how I met Melinda Connor as well, which was a fantastic organization he was involved with. So you were at CIHS, and you were doing stuff there, and you were creating a lab. Did you help build a laboratory?
Yes. So the specialty of the lab was sort of testing in a non-invasive way. So we did thermography. I became a specialist in thermography, a clinical thermographer.
Nice.
And of course, at Holos University, I was already exposed to Konstantin Karakov's devices that were the GDV and gas discharge visualization is what that stands for,
Yep.
or EPI, electrophotonic imaging. And that's actually where I started doing more and more in-depth work, looking at consciousness, looking at measuring consciousness, looking at what these devices can ultimately tell us about our status of energy and how we're managing stress. So,
right.
And now I actually teach that work as well.
Right. So the device we're talking about mainly there is the GDV. Is that and the BioWell? Am I understanding this is just an advanced version of the GDV?
Yes, you got it right.
Right. And so the GDV is emerged from a digital version of Kirlian photography, right?
Correct.
So maybe you can just explain a little bit about what that is for people who've never heard of it.
Sure. Kirlian photography essentially measures the fact that we have light emissions come off of our bodies. But it's not just bodies, it's any living thing. The popular image, I should say, is the phantom leaf, where an image of, or a whole leaf was cut, and then the Kirlians and many others, it hasn't been replicated all that often, but it does happen. Right. I have been with John Hubacker at C.Ht, and we have done some of this work. It's difficult to replicate, but nevertheless, what it looks at is that the fact that we've got a charge within our system, and it helps to create our biofield. So all of that, it means to say that it's like our light container, and that light container in our biofield contains information.
Right.
And the GDV is one technology that gets that. The BioWell is now the more advanced version of that technology, and it captures this essential light that is emitting off of our body, biophotonic images.
Right. And my understanding is that it does it by pumping a high voltage through the body, low current, kind of like shocking the body with a high voltage, and it sort of captures the discharge. What is it actually capturing? Are they electrons? Are they photons? What's actually being photographed?
Kind of a combination. I think in my deck for you, I have a picture of it, but essentially, yeah, and that's very confusing to people, right? We're talking about high voltage, low current, so it's less than a 9-volt battery. So you don't actually even feel it, which doesn't feel so good if you touch your tongue to a 9-volt battery, right? We're not talking anything like that. So in the early days of messing with the GDV at school, there were versions of it that did shock you, and then we figured out that you had to be grounded. So now those grounds are actually built in, and they don't cause a shock. And what's actually happening is that there's a CCD camera, and the CCD camera is taking multiple thousands of pictures per millisecond, and that gets layered as a result of the charged emissions, which is a kind of a combination of biophotons and like an electron cloud. So in that capturing, they turn to pixels. Those pixels contain information. So the adjacent technology to this is using a photomultiplier, and where you have to sit stationary and very still while the photomultiplier takes the emission images, and you're literally counting the photons that come off, and it's very difficult to sit there in a static position holding it for any length of time, and you need a dark room to do it. Right.
How well received or validated by the medical allopathic field is GDV BioWell?
In our country, not so well, because we have a limitation, of course, of our integral agencies that prevent a lot of these sort of subtle energy devices from being able to catch hold. And I want to be very clear that many countries do use this type of technology diagnostically. We don't say anything to that effect here in the US. It is looking at these pixels built on the shoulders of giants that have been measuring these types of fields and these emissions to create a map, if you will. So we're using the Sukujok hand system, the Korean hand system, the TCM 5-element theory, and the Jingwell points. So it's multiple systems that essentially tell a very similar story about the map inside the body from looking at the meridians. The meridians end at the fingertips, so that's why we actually take an image of, it's not an image of the fingertips, but we use the fingertips to actually make the capture.
Right. How much do you think this is going to, like, where are we going with this? Is it going to be, accepted? Is this, obviously you're working with Melinda and Caitlin on the NCCOEP.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at, that acronym. And which is, they've collected 15,000 research papers together to validate energy medicine. and the aspects. What is it you think is so difficult for the medical model to understand about this movement of energy medicine?
So, well, we have in the U.S. a for-profit model for healthcare, and on the scientific side, so that creates an argument a little bit, because we're talking about, from an energy medicine perspective, is putting responsibility back in the user's hands. You know, for us to know ourselves is really an essential, and that's part of what my master's thesis is about as well, and looking at some of the physiology that's having to do with. Science essentially doesn't believe anything it can't see. So even though we're using a model within the science of GDV, which has been well established, this is going back to the early 1800s and even earlier than that, from things that hold a static charge. Once you can even measure something that holds a static charge, you're talking about, oh, well, there must be something that is a complement to it. And so that was picked up from amber, and that's actually where the electrostatic started to actually build its basis of knowledge from. And then, you know, if you walk around on carpet where there's any kind of change of barometric pressure or something, you can shock yourself for other people, and that's it. That's the buildup of charge that essentially that we're measuring.
And how does this relate? We had Jim Ushman on the show the other week, and obviously his work has been in earthing for a long time.
Yes.
And so, you know, he's interested in increasing the amount of electrons in the body. Is that the same as increasing the charge?
Well, we want to be able to hold that charge. So what the BioWell is doing, or this type of technology, is looking at how well is our bio battery being able to hold that charge.
Nice.
Because if you've got a lot of light leakage, which is what stress ultimately creates, when that's been proven over and over again with biophoton and other technologies, that we actually leak light when we're super stressed. So to answer your question more directly, yes, we want to be able to keep the charge of negative ions, and that's like food to our body.
Right. So
that is a very important aspect of keeping ourselves healthy, is how well do our cells actually hang on to that charge. And I want to go back and answer your other question about validation. I don't know that we will ever see a very satisfactory method of validating at least this technology. What I had to do on my own is through a medical fellowship I was doing in something called endobiogeny, which was studying the endocrine system and looking at the multiple parameters that we looked at with CBC, with differential in blood, and stool, saliva. I did that for about 2.5 years with the fellows, and also brought them into the lab, did some testing. So I got to see this for 2.5 years of building this type of understanding. So to me, it's been very validated. From a clinical aspect, I'm quite satisfied.
Right.
So I train a lot of physicians on how to use this.
Yes. With regards to this notion of light, it's interesting because the light leakages are clearly a thing. How does that connect to this notion of shining with kind of health? Because, you know, when you see certain healthy people, they do shine. And I don't know whether it's a psychological thing or a physiological thing.
I would say both, because the psychological leads to the physiology.
Okay. So but aren't they, you're saying, aren't they shining light? Aren't they emitting light? Isn't that like light leakage?
No. So thank you for that. An opportunity to deal with a discrepancy, or what looks like a discrepancy.
Yeah.
When we're leaking light, it looks like you're limp, like a flower that hasn't had enough water. If you are having good boundaries, let's say that from a psychological point of view, as well as doing things such as earthing to juice up your field, then you're using that light container to keep its charge. When we're light leaking, we're losing our charge. So therein lies the subtlety.
But don't we emanate light? And isn't emanating light a good thing? I seem to remember Fritz Pop saying that the more light that comes out, the better.
Well, that depends on what you're. I don't know that that's what his
No.
literature said.
In terms of like the healthier something is, the more biophotons it emits.
Well, actually, I believe it to be the opposite. With the
Okay.
studies that we've done at CIHS, the more light leakage, the more biophotons that we can count leaking out of a person, that is to a level of stress.
Okay. And have you done any research where healers sort of like turn it on and like, all right, I'm going now, and what happens to the light coming out then?
Yeah, so it actually, and this is why we need other technologies other than just a photomultiplier to be able to see this, because, well, what's the cause for their more light to be coming out? It's intention and motivation and what we're doing, right? So if I'm going to focus as a healer, if I'm going to focus my intention on something, then I'm wanting that light to go there. I don't necessarily want the light to come from me. I want to be the hollow bone from which it travels through.
Right. So
but yes, you would see that. So
okay. So that, I think that was what I'm remembering here in the pop studies that I remember. I think he was looking at healers turning it on and off. It was around the time when they were doing it with the squid as well, and Sato and all that.
Yes, and it's an important differentiator because you do need to know what it is that you're measuring. So we brought healthy people into the lab and super stressed people into the lab. And then we also took super healthy people that got stressed and watched what the differences were. And the increase in biophoton leakage was when the healthy person had stress.
Right. How does this light leakage absorption relate to sunlight and the vitamin D and maybe that people are now staying in all the time? And
yeah, it's not great that we're staying in. When the very essence of vitamin D is to help boost our immune system. And to me, we're doing the exact opposite of what we need to be doing, really. We need herd immunity to be able to help us through this thing like COVID-19, SARS COVID-19. It kind of defies logic a little bit about that consideration. And getting out in the sun is absolutely hugely transformational to our biofield. It's once again, it's that analogy of, if you haven't watered a plant, it gets limp, and if it hasn't had enough light, it gets limp. Well, we have that same photosynthesis going on within ourselves as well.
And can we have too much water? Because I overwatered a plant the other day. It didn't like it.
That's right.
So is that
we can do too much of everything.
Right, so that relates to too much light?
Yes, you could say that. Okay. And because a plant that is necessarily just like us, would I go out in high noon every single day and stay out there for 3 hours? Well, especially not being a redhead, I'm super sensitive to do that. So there's limitations, at the Temple of Delphi in ancient Egypt, it says, know thyself and nothing in excess, right? So, and to thy own self be true. Yeah. So we need to know ourselves in this regard.
Good ISIS reference there. I like it. Good. So then, what are you doing nowadays? You're seeing clients with the BioWell, and what else are you doing?
I'm also training people how to use this. I have a real. I'm not super salesy. That's not where I come from. I do distribute the BioWell, but it's an unselfish thing where I want even kids to be able to use the language of energy, to be able to see when something goes on in the dynamics that shift in a household. Yeah. So you can see where the stress actually starts to lead, and I can show you some images here when we get there.
Yeah. I think that would be a great idea to show us some images so people get to understand, and maybe you can do a little bit of interpretation. I don't know what you've got planned, but all open to see whatever you've got.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just we didn't plan on necessarily showing super stressed and unstressed, but I'll show you essentially
whatever
in a nutshell what that looks like. Yeah. Let me just get to this spot. So.
And I have to do my seamless transition at some point, which is.
I'm ready to share when you are.
Okay, you can come on and share, and I will transition it when.
Okay, great. There we go.
Okay. Interesting. So.
It's got a second. It's doing,
Oh, it's doing audio. I wondered why it was so small.
it's doing subtitles.
Yeah.
Hang
That's
on, let me
interesting.
turn that off. That's hilarious. Okay, where do I turn off subtitles? Here we go. Got it. It's not. Oh, here. I got it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's all right. It's the tech.
It is tech.
It's great
but at
tech.
least I knew where to go to figure it out. So we're good. All right. Awesome.
Okay.
Okay. Essentially, this is what. Are we good to go, Markabati?
We are good to go. I'm just I'm resizing your image as we speak, but you don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
You carry on.
Beautiful. So this is essentially what a corona discharge from a finger looks like. And that light capturing, if we were to put it into slow-mo and be able to put a camera there, which is what the CCD camera is, but to be able to capture that, that's a bit of an illustration of that. This is an actual corona discharge. By the way, looks a little bit like some flares of stress. So to me, what's actually happening is that this is a combination of where physics and chemistry actually meets. So this that we're looking at here is essentially how these broken bits that you see in the person's field, this is the before of a sound meditation experience. We want to see this beautiful, that kind of blue that's right there, if you can see where my cursor is moving.
Yes.
We want to see that nice and homogeneously. Oh, sorry. We want to see that nice and evenly all the way around the body. So where we see these broken up lines and all of that, that is what stress looks like. This person still has a lot of energy. Sometimes when it's a super very tight, narrow energy close to the body, the energy is lacking. So there's a way of seeing that as well. We literally measure joules. So this is literally also measuring stress. So the before is the orange line, and the colorful bar on the bottom is the scale. So the orange line, you can see this is the measurement of stress, and it's in medium. I have measured people that are a 10 out of 10. And then the energy, the overall energy in joules is this number here. So what I was saying is that this person still has energy. They're still essentially in the optimal.
Hmm. Sorry, what is this measuring? What are the bars?
Joules,
Okay.
literally the energy joules coming off of the all together, all of the what I was showing before, all of the pixels here are information.
And
so
you
all
can
of
get
that
the
is counted.
yeah, oh, wonderful! You can get the actual data.
It's quantitative data.
Excellent.
So the number of joules, which I didn't put here on this slide, you can see is 58.8. And then after the approximate 9-minute sound meditation, it went to 59.26. Well, if you let a person bake a little bit longer, it would be ideal then to take the measurement. But I had to do this measurement kind of right away. So, which is, you should let 15 to 20 minutes go by before you remeasure a person. But nevertheless, you're able to see the significant change in the stress level output here. And we want to go more into the optimal zone. So in 9 minutes, this was, able to affect a major change. And this also speaks to the brain hemispheres. How well are they communicating with each other? And we're not looking at those quantitative numbers here, but in the overall aggregate total of what we're seeing, that is part of the results. The balance in this tab, or in this area here, is speaking to the balance of left-right symmetry.
Right.
So this is a very important aspect in Chinese medicine and in most ancient systems, most whole person systems, Tibetan, native, etc., Ayurveda.
Yeah.
The organs disbalance speaks to, so this person is in fight, flight, or fright stress. So when we're seeing this, you can see really high nervous system charge. And this the purple line is after the sound experience. And you can see how then it immediately went into an optimal phase. So this is, being able to see that we can do something very quickly to turn around our consciousness. And to look at this, the size of where the placement of the chakras is represented in the color of the balls here, and you can see that there's also a size difference. So, like I said, this person had energy, but she was dealing with a lot of stress, feeling helpless. And on the left side of the body, which is the right side of the screen, this is representing more of an internal conversation, not feeling super empowered. And then when we see after, it's like this person is ready to take charge and actually do something.
Right.
So that's essentially what I wanted to just give a visual to for what we're talking about.
Great.
Yeah, so I'll stop sharing here. There's much more we can go into, but we'll follow your lead.
Okay, wonderful. No, I mean it's great that the technology seems to have advanced to the point where I remember when I saw the GDV, I couldn't get the raw data out. So I'm liking the fact that you're getting numbers of each of the flare points.
Oh, definitely. And it's much easier to extract from the BioWell than it is from the older technology.
So what's happening in, like, what is the energy that's coming from us? And I get that, like, I suppose my question is, like, instead of it being a medical model where the pharmaceutical industry is there, and the reason why we don't have energy in medicine might be best answered by Healing in Politics, that book, and the notion of you can't sell energy and different things like that. But what's really happening with the energy, and how does it interact with our psyche?
So, well, one of the things that actually, appreciate the question, and one of the things that actually took me to graduate seminary is this curiosity of where was our conscious focus ultimately, and what did it do to our field? So my interest is, well, what happens out here in our fields? I'm trying not to make my arms be super wide, but it's as far
remember,
as my arms will
you've
go.
got this. Yeah.
My field's a bit bigger than that, and so is everybody else's. If they're not, they're closer to death than being alive. So the field contains this information, as I mentioned earlier. Some people are exquisitely sensitive to picking up on that type of information. The healers, the people who are energetists and practitioners, etc. So the psychology is also, what is that information that has been programmed into our field, has been based on prior experiences. And this gets into the level of our conscious awareness and how it is that we are perceiving our external environment. Is it a threat? Is it calm and safe? And I myself had to learn to rewire my nervous system because I didn't grow up in a safe household.
Right.
So this was something for me to come into, well, where is my own empowerment with being able to choose the conditions in which do my cells hold charge, or am I so stressed and my system is so out of whack that energy can't stay contained? So you asked earlier, what is the energy? It's energy is a definition, is the ability for an organism to do work. So if we, and in thermography, when we're looking at certain color patterns, we're looking at some of those color patterns to give us information based on the laws of thermodynamics. Where there is heat, there is work. So those are just based in Newton's principles in general. And then if we apply more energy medicine properties to our thinking about what is our psychology, what is our emotional set point, how well do we feel in charge of our own conditions in life? Who's driving the bus, so to speak?
Who is driving the bus?
Hopefully it's us individually. This is what Carl Jung spoke to, the power of individuation that is so dynamic and important. And this is one of the reasons why I think that, really coming into the time of being our own guru.
Right.
And if you have a teacher, beautiful, but this is also about the empowerment of self. Well, who is the self? Well, that needs to be defined. Most of us have learned conditional belonging in our lifetimes.
Yeah. And I think also society has kind of programmed us to assume that empowerment comes from like stuff that we get out there. Like if I earn money, or if I earn fame, or if I earn, that gives me back the empowerment. But where does the power really come from?
So thank you. I actually like to use the metaphor of operating from an old power paradigm. Like, do you want to be a coal miner today, or do you want to be a solar, a tube of light, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's an old paradigm where there's people still dying from being coal miners, right? So there's this one sort of idea of power source that's what we needed. We need these things to define us. We need these ideals based on other people's labels or what's important. And yeah, they can drive you until they decide that they don't drive you. And I think that's some of the beautiful aspects of what's happening in this reset with people coming more even into their own internal space. Yes, we will get outside and get the sun again and hang out with people that we know and love. But at the same time, we're getting to really feel what's important to us. This resetting, how's it going to feel now between getting work done in your home to then going and sitting in your car and sitting in traffic like you did? Is that rat race may feel a little different to you now because the set point is changed.
Right. So what are people to do with this? Like, how are they best to harness their reconnecting with their inner power, as opposed to always looking for external validation? What's their root?
One of the things that I teach around this, first of all, there's so many answers to that question, but one of the sort of on-ramps, if you will, to this idea is getting off of the drama triangle, getting off of the source of where you're looking outside yourself for that sense of empowerment, for that sense of belonging, and coming back into, well, what is your priority? And we need to have our own set of focuses. And I actually want to interrupt that answer and go someplace that breaks down a paradigm a little bit from an age-old time. And that is Penfield Wilder spoke about that the mind is not in the brain, right? But the brain is like an antenna and can give us a lot of information, so that which we're programming, etc., into our brain. The triune brain model is the hindbrain is the back head area, the reptilian brain, if you will. I have a couple slides on this. I should pull them up so I can give people an opportunity to be able to see what it is I'm talking about. So let me do that.
And of course, I'll do a seamless transition.
This going back and forth. You're brilliant.
Okay.
Oops. Hang on.
That's a beautiful picture.
Yes, it's meaningful. Okay, so when we think about the survival element, which is really the drama triangle that I was just speaking to, it's that sense of power is coming from how we make money. Is it on the backs of other people, or are we actually feeling very much inspired? It can be usually, I'm not going to say that the inspirations don't happen in both ways, because they do. However, when we are thinking more about the well-being, we're usually inspired in an altruistic way. If we're wired and coming from the power of only survival, then that is less altruistic. It's more usually somebody has to win. And that's that survival mentality, is that somebody has to win.
Right.
And our lives depended on it before, but we still have this wiring, right? Because if you didn't get that hunt, you didn't eat. So that's where that old brain wiring is, the oldest cortex. So then in the limbic system, I'm sorry, I said Penfield Wilder, I meant to say Paul MacLean. Okay. Paul MacLean is the person who authored this as the mammalian structure of the brain. Right. And I'm going someplace different than this, but nevertheless, I'm building on this platform.
Yes.
The limbic system is the middle brain where emotions start to come online.
Right.
And then where we start to, have some more feeling sense. And then the neocortex is more executive thinking, higher order thinking. So, I just, some of us have a hamster that's running the show. It's that default mode network where you're just going round and round and round. And that can be the inner critic. That can be different things that we have as patterns of based on survival. Oops. This is how we operate.
Sorry, so, I've ruined the stream. Let me get it back.
Oh.
I've lost that. Hold on, I'm coming back to you. I had to start something again. Okay, you're back.
Do I need to go back?
No, it was only for that one moment.
Oh, okay. So if we realize that we've got this old hind brain, of course, it's still part of our wiring. And we also want to bring online our emotional IQ, if you will, our intelligence to be able to use ourselves in an emotionally balanced way. Mm-hmm. And then the frontal cortex. So my model is you want to know your history. You want to know where you come from. And then the middle cortex is know thyself. You want to know what governs your patterns. When you see this type of behavior, when you get angry, etc., there are things that sort of excite the system. Well, then now it becomes about choice.
Right.
Where am I going? Am I going to do that same old thing that I have been doing? Or am I going to advance myself on the path and choose a new direction? And that is the critical thinking. So all three of these go together. We need to know our history because we need to know how we're wired. And then knowing ourselves, speaking to our emotional set points, and then knowing where we're going. That has to do with our conscious choice.
Is that middle cortex? Is that the limbic system that you're talking about there?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. And there's a map to the emotional body from what I see from a healer and clairvoyance perspective. There's a map to how it is that at the levels of consciousness, this is to your point earlier, weaving that back in, where what's happening in the field from a psychological measure, how we're using energy. Well, it takes a lot of energy to live in structures of manipulation. It takes a lot of energy to constantly be angry or have your nervous system at such a charge.
Right.
So we want to be able to have an awareness to be able to choose what it is that we actually want. This takes work. I am not saying that this is like, oh, okay, I got the concept and let's go. Yeah. This actually really does take work, and that's why I teach something called the drama triangle, which leads you. I was downloaded an answer off the drama triangle, which is a whole other thing that we could get into on maybe one of your other days.
Yeah. Well, actually, I do want to talk about the triad of things. Okay. Have you more slides that you want us to go through at the moment?
No, we can come out of this.
Okay, cool. And then I'll have to do a seamless transition again. What has come up for me, and a lot in these conversations, is this notion of three, of the Trinity, of the triad, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, the yin yang bit in the middle, blah blah blah. And I noticed that you had your triad, your Trinity, and just to give some outline, it seems like the real magic happens in the universe when we take something with something else and harmonize them together so that they create a third separate point. And I know that in meditation, one of the main postures for going and traveling through the third eye into awareness is a unification of the Ida and the Pingala up through into the third eye. What have you got to say about this with regards to the brain and trinities and stuff like that?
love the question, and that brings me to my master's thesis, which is another triadic point, right? So I don't have the image here to share, but maybe if we can get on this topic another time.
Yeah.
I found an image at it was the Church of Ascension, which was at the Kremlin in Moscow.
Huh.
And they were in the midst of redoing this church. It hadn't been open. It was first built in the 1500s, and then it closed in the late 1700s. I happened to be there when they were just opened it and starting to do the refurbishments.
In the 1500s?
Say again?
In the 1500s?
No. That's when it first opened.
All right.
Then again, it stayed opened until the 1700s. It had not been open since the 1700s.
Wow.
I was there in 2010 or 11, I forget which year exactly. But what I found on the ceiling, so this is the Church of Ascension, which has dedicated to Archangel Gabriel.
Mm-hmm.
Archangel Gabriel is noted in the historic texts as being the archangel that gave Mother Mary the information that she was going to give birth to baby Jesus.
Mm.
And so there was a triad. I had never seen a halo in any of the other artwork, and I had already been there for a month and done every museum I could.
Right.
You only see circles. This was the only museum, or not museum, church, where I saw on the ceiling a triad of these points.
Mm.
So what is so fascinating about this is that what was the thoughts that were leading me on my, and I do have another slide, so you'll do another seamless transition in a second. But
just give me notice.
Yes, the details of this Alta Major chakra, which is something that was really important as this triadic structure that was speaking to me. And I just kept finding evidence here and there and everywhere.
Mm.
Also with this, there's a magic of threes. I totally agree with you.
Right.
So the Alta Major chakra is this little known chakra in the back head. And here, let's do your seamless transition.
I'm ready.
So that
I'm ready.
we can give people a
Anytime.
visual.
It won't even be a microsecond in the transition of seamlessness.
Fantastic.
Ness.
Love it. So for this point, I'll just stay on this image rather than, actually, no, I won't. Let me go back. Sorry. Don't get sick. There. So when we look at this triad of points, and to what you were just speaking to as well, is the Ida Pingala, this has to do with the movement of energy in our own systems. Mm. So we want to be able to keep that charge. This is also what's meant by the collection of Kundalini energy, but we don't want to just go awaken these energy centers without some conscious awareness to what it is that we're doing, because we can cause problems with that as well. So the Alta Major chakra is known as a minor chakra, but it acts like a major chakra. And this is left out of a lot of teachings, and it's left out on purpose. Even in traditional Chinese medicine, when you're learning to start to needle the back head, do 16 is this point. You don't needle it because you can really cause damage, significant damage to a person. But this is this point, and it's known as the mouth of God in several cosmologies, or whatever the translation of that is. It's where inspiration comes in. And if you know Eileen McCusick, who's a friend of ours, many of us, who has created biofield tuning, she calls it her mail slot. And as I have talked with many people who are clairvoyants, they feel this energy in the back of their head as they're getting a stimulus for going this direction or going that direction, that actually helps to tell this story. So I'll back up to the third part, which is the vagus nerve. Right. So these three areas have a direct, major information highways, let's say. So the vagus nerve innervates, it's known as the wanderer, or the 10th cranial nerve, and it innervates every single organ in the system. And so what this is actually doing, which we now know, I only intuited when I was writing my thesis, that I believe that it's the byway and the highway to the gut-brain connection. And we now know that there's the enteric nervous system. We've always known that, but we didn't know the nerve stimulus that it traveled upon, afferently and efferently. That means up and down. And so that ability for us to gain information, the vagus nerve is hugely important with being able to bring relaxed or stress, whatever the signal is, to the body. Energy is energy. It's just neutral. It matters what we do with it.
I have a question on this front, because something that happened with me was when I came across Jerry Pollack's work with the fourth phase of water, and speaking about proticity and the flow of protons in the exclusion zone. I don't want to get too complex for those listening, but what I want to ask about is the exclusion zone is a buffer area with the coherent structure of water. And then on the other side of the exclusion zone, you've got hydrogen, a lot of hydrogen ions free and loose moving because of the way the water is matricized. And so you've got protons, hydrogen ions, protons. So you've got proton flow on one side. And then on the other side, you've got all the connective tissue, the collagen fibers. Jim Oshman says a living matrix, which is conductive. So you've got electrons flowing through there. Where is the third point between the electron negative flow and the hydrogen ions positive flow? And is that connected in any way to your work with this sort of bilateral movement?
I appreciate where you're going with that. And the easy answer right now, or hard answer really, is I don't know that we have the ability to be able to look at this in a holistic way yet. Funny enough, I was with Gerald Pollack at the time of being in Russia. So we weren't at the Kremlin together, but we were in St. Petersburg together. So I got to see that presentation of when he was just demonstrating the exclusion zone. And quite possibly this has a lot to do because in the nature of my thesis, I'm dealing a lot with the fascia and used Oshman's work in order to be able to tell that story. We're crystalline structures, and that probably has a lot to do with how it is that we are also holding our charge.
Yes.
To the extent that the nervous system is able to hold that charge, because what stress does is it makes a repelling thing. So we don't necessarily have, it would be interesting to use Pollack's work in his lab. And there is a neuroscientist that I know there, and I'll have to ask, are they measuring, taking samples from really stressed people as a serum or a way of doing some measurements, and being able to see that in a relaxed person, much in the same way that we did with the biophoton leakage.
Exactly, yeah.
What is it that we see?
Shall we stop the screen share now?
Sure.
I'm realizing we're coming close to the end, and you were talking, and I wanted to have your lovely being on the screen as you were sharing that. So what do you think really is going on in this unification of twos into the triad? Like what happened? What's so magical about it?
The twos into the triad, like what's magical about?
There seems to be a phenomenon where you take the duality and you blend it together in such a way that it creates a harmonic resonance of a third, unseen previously, element, consciousness, energy.
So what I would say to that is this notion of complementarity. In physics, it means that you have opposites in that dualistic nature. And this is something that if you follow Carl Kalaman's work or Barbara Handclough, when we're speaking about the level of consciousness that we have access to right now as humans comes in waves. And since the Mayan calendar gave us a lot of the roadmaps, if you will, for let's say an awakening of our consciousness, we're in what is called the ninth wave. It's still the duality. Now, what gets turned on, in my view, around this is it just only a duality? Like, you can see complementarity as being a conductive force, if you will, in our lives, where there is a challenge that we're dealing with. But as soon as we thank that challenge, we're shifting our energy to realize everything is happening good in our life. So the third element to which I'm deriving some of in taking your question to
Right.
a different level or a different place potentially.
Yeah.
I apologize if I am, but
No,
this
it's
is
great.
just how I'm seeing
That's what
it.
it's about.
The opposites of being, let's say, angry to calm, or where we go into the emotions as being part of our charge system, if you will, because they really are, but they're also the gunpowder to our being able to be creative. So we can use it as a destruction, or we can use it to be complementary. And that complementarity is a thing unto itself that needs the two opposition, the plus minus, the negative,
right.
positive. It needs that polarity of forces is needed in order to come up with the third.
Right.
And that involves, I believe, consciousness.
Right. Lovely.
That's what I believe.
Wow. What a great rundown, Tiffany. It's been amazing. Thanks for coming on and being your wonderful self. You've got some good links for us. I believe that there's a GDV, the BioWell. There's a training course that's normally only for people who have purchased the machine, but people can now get it for free, right?
Well, they can come into the training and see what it's all about. So if they weren't ready to jump in and make a purchase or do anything like that, it's a good way just to pop in and see if this is something of interest to you.
Nice. And we're going to post those links underneath. And what else? That people can get their own BioWell? Sure.
Yes, all of that you can find that on my website. More information is also there. I think I had given you a link on just learning more about it.
Yeah. I will. You posted a couple of links to me. I'll send them on.
And there's also, if for anybody from a medical intuitive side needs, I do 15-minute free consults. So if there's something that I can do, I don't necessarily do a parlor trick in 15 minutes, give somebody a life reading. That's not the point. But if there's something that can be dealt with, that a person needs some care and that's concerning them, I'm happy to walk them through it. And the last piece on the BioWell is that Constantine, the inventor, just made a sale go on for empowering people to be able to see their own energy. And that's a super important thing at this time of COVID. So BioWell never goes on sale. This is a rare event. So if you were ever thinking about that technology, now would be the time.
Wonderful. And then how can people find you, apart from Facebook?
Healandthrive.com.
Heal and Thrive.
Heal and Thrive.
Oh, wow. I always remember how wonderful your library was. It was all labeled. Yes. I was so jealous. It was labeled, everything. It was like being in an esoteric bookstore. It was fantastic. Tiffany, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you to my guests today, Tiffany and Benjamin. We talked about creation, and again, the triad comes up. And it keeps coming up, and there is a cycle of these things. And no matter what's going on in the duality, there's always the balance and the reharmonization of the reharmonization of these things. Ben, I'm muting you. The reharmonization of the duality. There's balance. Look after yourselves. Be present with yourselves and breathe. Remember, everything is already okay. Okay? So, I've got a book Evolve. Check it out online. Otherwise, see you tomorrow. Thanks. Like and share where you can. Lots of love.